The United States has asked that the UN Security Council meet publicly on Monday to discuss Russia's military buildup along the Ukrainian border. UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield called Russia's behavior, quote, a clear threat to international peace and security. Germany has also warned that the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline could be part of a sanctions package should Russia invade Ukraine. In recent weeks, Russia has massed some 100,000 troops near its border with Ukraine.
Russian military drills on the border with Ukraine. These are the scenes keeping the West on its toes. Yet, Russia has repeatedly said it has no intention of invading Ukraine, and that even the thought of war between the two nations was unacceptable. A position also echoed by residents in the streets of Moscow. I am not ready to go to war with a fraternal people. We are Slavic. It's not acceptable. There are no threats from the territory of the Ukrainian state. Therefore, I believe it doesn't make sense. I understand that there's a risk of a full-scale war, but I believe that the parties will manage to negotiate all their disagreements and come to a consensus. But after the US and NATO rejected Moscow's main demands, including barring Ukraine from ever joining NATO, everyone is waiting to see how President Vladimir Putin will respond. So far, the Kremlin has offered a glimmer of hope that a de-escalation may be possible by keeping the door open for further talks. Concerning the document replying to Russia's demands, there is a response that allows us to consider the beginning of a serious conversation, but on secondary issues. There is no positive reaction on the main issue in this document. Another chance for diplomacy will come next month, when Russian, French, Ukrainian and German delegates will meet in Berlin for talks.
With no solution to the crisis in sight, the West is becoming clearer on what costs Russia would incur if it invades Ukraine. Here's U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland.
We continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
And how can you say that for sure? Where does your confidence come from on that?
As I said, we've had extensive consultations at every level with our German allies. I'm not going to get into the specifics here today, but we will work with Germany to ensure that the pipeline does not move forward.
Let's go over to our correspondent, Matthias Böllinger, in Kiev for the latest. Matthias, a clearer picture is emerging of possible sanctions on Russia for any incursion, including the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Is this kind of support reassuring to Kiev?
Yes, it is. It's been a long time demand from Kiev to stop this pipeline because it's seen in Kiev as a tool to diminish the importance of Ukraine as a gas transit country, which would weaken Ukraine's position in negotiations, which would make it more vulnerable also to military incursions. So this kind of deterrence is what Ukraine has been hoping for.
U.S. President Joe Biden says he believes a Russian incursion is likely. He's tried to impress that upon his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky. Has this prompted Ukraine to increase its preparations for a possible invasion?
Well, the Ukrainian government has been remarkably calm about all this situation. The president has said several times that people should stay calm and that an invasion is not imminent. However, there have also been conflicting messages from the Ukrainian official side. At other moments, he has discussed extensively possible scenarios of an incursion. What has been going on in the past few days was that many allies, notably the US and Britain, have sent weapons to to Ukraine, and notably weapons that can be deployed quickly and that would inflict a major harm on an intruding army. So there have, of course, been preparations, and the goal of these preparations is to deter Russia by signaling that any invasion would have a high cost on the invading army. It would have devastating effects, of course, on the country that would be invaded, and there is some kind of an idea that you can have a balance of deterrence if the other party, the Ukraine, would be able to inflict major harm on this army, even if it cannot defeat it.
Matthias, diplomatic talks are set to continue in the coming weeks. Does Ukraine believe an invasion can be averted?
I think Ukraine is absolutely not sure what to expect, and whether an invasion is an incursion is imminent at all, or whether this is more of a scenario to get the West talking. But of course, these talks are important to Ukraine because if it can be averted, if it is planned, and if it can be prevented, then it's through talks.
Matthias, thank you so much. DW's Matthias Berlinger there in Kiev. Let's go straight over to our correspondent, Emily Sherwin in Moscow. Emily, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is clearly on the table now among possible sanctions on Russia. How serious is the Kremlin taking that?
Well, publicly, Russian officials usually downplay the idea of sanctions. They kind of say, you know, we've been under sanctions for so long. Who cares if there's more? But I do think that the idea of sanctions on Nord Stream is serious. First of all, of course, it's an economic factor for Russia. This is a huge project, and for Russia, you know, the main pillar of its economy is income in oil and gas sales, exports, and so on. I think it's hugely worrying to Russia that the U.S. is making these backup plans for exporting oil and gas to Europe in case Russia cuts off supplies, so creating alternative routes that could be damaging to Russia's economy. And I think more importantly, when it comes to Nord Stream 2, there's a symbolic element. So Germany mainly has, you know, really stood up for this project over the years, despite bad relations with Russia or differences with Russia. It's always kind of defended this project among European allies as well. So I think, you know, this huge prestige project for Russia, if that's really stopped, that would be, you know, a blow symbolically in that sense, but also because it would show that Germany and European allies really are taking this seriously, and they're willing to incur some economic damage themselves in order to punish Russia.
Vladimir Putin is due to talk with Emmanuel Macron, the French president, this morning. What are the chances, Emily, of progress being made there on the diplomatic front?
Well, I think this is an interesting phone call because it's the first high-level talks that we're seeing after the written response that Russia received to its demands from the U.S. and NATO this week. So I think Emmanuel Macron will kind of be taking the temperature with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has been kind of quite quiet, actually, on this whole issue and on the question of security guarantees basically for a month. So I think it will be interesting in that sense. Most likely, the two leaders will also talk about the talks in the Normandy format, which happened just recently, and there are new rounds of talks planned on that. Those, of course, talks over Ukraine and the peace process there, including France, Russia, Ukraine, and Germany. But I think for the Russians, this is kind of a side issue. The Ukraine question, the Normandy format, that's a side issue. They essentially want these security guarantees from NATO and the U.S. They have been issuing demands to NATO and the U.S. So the Europeans are kind of, you know, on the sidelines there. But it shows that Russia is certainly willing to keep talking on all levels and with all leaders.
Emily, thank you very much. DW's Emily Sherwin there in Moscow.